with you.
Hi there, I'm Greg Miller, and welcome to show number 9 of the guitar class. This week, I want to talk to you about improvisation and how to build a solo. And we're going to take a solo apart and look at some different techniques and that are used, some elements in it, some different scale patterns, show how tension is increased and decreased and stuff like that in it. But the first thing we'll do maybe is to tune up. So I'll give you some tuning notes. Here's a low E. And here's an A. There's a D. And a G. And a B. And an E. Okay, improvisation, or ad-libbing, ad-libbing meaning at liberty, is the art of making a melody line up as you go, as you fly, without having a preconceived notion about what it's about. There are a few guidelines that you should follow. The biggest of which being that you have to select the notes around the chord that the band is playing, or around other notes that the musicians are playing that you're with. There really are no rules. You don't have to play particular notes. Different note choices is one of the things that makes different guitar players sound different. To use a scale, to use scales as examples to look at how to solo is good in the sense that you can see sort of a logical reason why people are picking the notes that they're picking, because they do fall into a pattern. And the stranger the guitar player, the more outside his playing is, the harder it is to figure out what he's doing, because he may not be following a standard scale. He might be doing some crazy thing. But today, I want to look at the blues scale again, like we have a few times. For any of you that haven't seen the last lessons or missed one or anything like that, you can send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I'll mail you out these lessons. The address is at the end of the program. I want to talk about the blues scale that we've looked at already, and the major scales that we've looked at already. And I want to show you the way that they relate to one another, and how they're sort of inside of one another, and different patterns that you can use. Help you maybe break out of a blues rut if you're always playing the same solo with using a blues scale all the time. And then to take apart a solo and let you have a look at how it's put together. Firstly, the blues scale that we've been looking at. We've seen that before. And the major scale, that's one form. That's another form. That's another form. And then that's the other one. There's 4 of them. If you play, well, when you play a major scale, you start on the root, and you play up to a root, and you keep going until you get up to another root. Until you get up to those target notes or those roots every time. And that's what makes a major scale. A major scale is starting and going up whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Inside that major scale, though, if you start on the 6th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you play the major scale starting on the 6th note, you're going to end up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You want to play it 1 full octave, starting on the 6th note and ending 8 scale tones higher. You're going to end up on the same note, and in this case, in A, it's going to be an F sharp. And what that is, it's a mode in the scale. You can break the scale down into 7 different modes, 1 for each note in the scale, and then it starts over again. But if you start and end on the 6th note, it's called the Aeolian mode, and another term for that is just the minor scale. And so the minor scale is located inside the major scale. The blues scale is a modification of that minor scale. A couple notes have been added and a couple notes have been removed from it. And the difference between an F-sharp minor scale and an F-sharp blues scale. Blues scale is just a little funkier sounding. They've added that note right there, taken this note out. So when you think about a blues scale, it's really a minor scale. It's half minor, half major, but there's a minor third in it. And it's a modification of that Aeolian mode or minor scale. And because that minor scale, F sharp minor, is located inside of A major, that F sharp minor scale is referred to as the relative minor of A major because it's inside the scale. And A major is referred to as the relative minor of F sharp. A major is referred to as the relative major of F sharp minor because they're related. To look at that graphically on the fingerboard, what you can do is, if you want to play a major scale, let's say an A major scale, you put your index finger on the root and you play that pattern ascending and descending, and you start on that root note. To use the blues scale in there, because the blues scale has a lot of real hip kind of little tricks that you can use in it. The notes land under your fingers real easy. You can find the relative minor of a major scale or a major key real quick by putting your pinky on the root of the key and putting each finger on a consecutive fret like that. And your index finger will land on the root of the relative minor. So this is an A major scale. If I put my pinky on that A and put these fingers down consecutively, I'll end up on an F sharp. And that's the F sharp minor scale that you can play off of that note, or you can play an F sharp blues scale. It doesn't matter. And you can see the way that that blues scale will just sort of flow into that major scale, no matter what pattern you're using. If you play that blues scale, what you'll find, if you wrote down all the notes that you played inside of this scale, and you wrote down all the notes you played inside of this scale, you'd see that most of them are the same. There's a few different ones in the F sharp minor, F sharp blues scale, but they sort of give the scale a characteristic sound when you play those weird notes. They're a little off, a little outside. Well, that's not a bad thing because you may want it to sound that way for whatever reason. When people are playing, a lot of times they switch between those two scales to choose notes from for a solo. Somebody may play they're picking notes out of that blues scale there and out of this one at the beginning. When you play these scales, especially when you're soloing, you don't want to play them from lowest note to highest note like that. They sound rudimentary and they sound like scales, and you don't want it to sound like you're practicing. You want it to sound like you're making a melody, like you're playing a piece of music. So when you start out playing with these scales and kind of fooling around with them, a real good idea is to sort of take them randomly, pick notes at random, just at the beginning, to give yourself an idea of how the notes sound in some other order than just ascending and descending from lowest to highest note. You can skip strings. Like that. You can play them in a consecutive order on one string, and then backwards on the next string. And you'll hear how the notes jumble up, and it may give you some ideas. Your imagination's basically the limit. I mean, you can play anything that you want, and you should fool around with it. It's really good to play over top of a pre-recorded song or a tape that you've made, like playing an A major chord, like that. Play a major scale over it, and play an A blues scale over it, and then try the relative minor over it, F sharp blues scale. And you can hear how some of the notes sound differently, and some rub a little more, and some are really in. And to take a whole, you can take a whole progression like that blues progression we looked at a couple weeks ago. When those chords are changing like that, suddenly the notes that you play in the scale won't be the same, won't have the same, they won't be same relative to each chord. Even though the chords are in the same key, the notes that you're playing are different. And so when you play a D while the band's playing an E chord, it's going to sound one way, but when they switch to an A chord and you're playing that D, it's going to sound totally different. So even if you're playing the same scale, if the band's switching chords, your scale is going to sound different. One thing I should mention about when you play a relative minor scale over top of an A, the root of the scale is still an F sharp, those three spots that we looked at as the roots. But if you're playing it over top of an A major chord, you don't want to be going to that F sharp all the time, because it's not going to be the root of the chord that you're hearing, even though it's the root of the scale. So you want to, if you're playing it over top of an A major chord, you want to find the A's in that scale, and they're there, there, and there. So when you play a line inside that F sharp blues scale, when it's functioning as a relative minor scale, and the chord is an A, you want to play the F sharp scale but land on an A as your home base or your target note. So to play on an A there, or an A here, or an A here. You'll find that the scale does lead toward it. It moves toward that A. Maybe what I'll do is just show you a couple of sort of little tricks to so you can kind of keep an eye on what I'm doing when I take the solo apart for you. When you play these scales, it's a good idea to try to slip between notes and make some notes real graceful in and out, and other notes really brash and stick out, and that makes your playing more interesting. If you're just playing the same tempo through the whole solo, and you're playing each note identical, it's going to sound real boring. And some of the tricks that players use for that are slides, bends, and for those of you that have it, a whammy bar. The sliding thing, you can, basically what your ear tells you, just go for it. If you don't hear a note, don't put a note in there. If you need to slide up to, let's say, this G, think of it like a target note. You know, we were talking a couple lessons ago about arpeggios, and they're very big, and you have to keep an eye on that target note even when you're starting to get up to that note. And you just focus on that note. Focus on that G and slide up to it. Don't worry about what note you're starting on, and don't start on a definite note and slide up unless you're supposed to do that. If you just want to get up to that G, just pick the string and make some noise, even if it's garbagey sort of noise like that. And as you're sliding up, mute the other two strings and mute any other strings that are ringing. So when you're up there, all you hear is that G. If you want to start on a note, pick the note definitely and slide up to it. When you hear a lot of players just sort of whip into a note, they're not consciously starting on one note and sliding up to another note. It's just sort of a just a wash of noise that they want, just a and then that note kind of jumping out of the noise. Saxophone players use that, use something similar to that. When they play, they have to take a breath. After they've been playing for a few minutes, they're going to have to inhale and start all over again. Guitar players can breathe and play guitar at the same time. Some of them can. If you slide in the same sense that a saxophone player takes a breath, your playing will sound, it'll sound like it has more life. It'll sound more human or something. When you play a line and you pause and you slide into another line, it gives the listener time to sort of listen to what you've played and digest it and then get ready for more. Whereas if you're flailing for 6 minutes straight, it's a little crazy to listen to that. It gets boring after a while. To make things exciting, you don't have to always be doing the rankest, wildest thing. Silence is sometimes the best thing that you could possibly do. The bending stuff, we talked about bending back a few lessons ago when we were talking about the blues scale. When you bend a note, you should try to get as many fingers on the string as you can. Fret the note really close to the fret and use all the muscles in all of the fingers that are on the string to bend the note. Some of the parts of your fingers won't come up, and you might be able to dig underneath the string like that. Some people, when they bend a note, they push all the strings. Whatever works better for you. It doesn't really matter. But the one thing that will really help you is if you use all of your fingers to push those notes up and pull them back. And the whammy bar thing. I guess if you have one, just grab it and play a note and jerk it around and find out what it does. You can make lots of ugly sounds with it. And it can be used to play little melody lines. It can be used just as that dive bomb thing. Those kind of noises, you can use it to make it sound like a car. It's nice as a vibrato tool if you can learn to use it real subtly. If you play a note, the thing about that kind of vibrato is that when you play that note, if you vibrato it like that, you're only bending above the note. The pitch only ever increases because you're increasing the tension on the string, so the pitch is going to increase. But with the whammy bar, you can pull the string tighter or drop it lower. So when you do that, the pitch kind of circles around the one note that you're playing, above and below, above and below. And we talked about this kind of vibrato too, and we talked about the blues scale. You can do that with your fingers by pushing the string toward the nut and pulling it toward the tailpiece. And this solo that I'm going to take apart for you uses all those kind of techniques. Bending, sliding. It uses a major scale and it uses its relative minor scale. It's a song by a band called Toto, and it's called Rockmaker. And the guitar player was Steve Lukather. I'll just play it once through for you. What he's doing here is moving from scale pattern to scale pattern, like pretty much every soloist is doing. He may not be thinking about that while he's doing it, but in terms of learning it, it's sometimes a real good idea to break it down into that and try to see what they're playing in each section of the neck as they move around. See if you can find a pattern that they're using. When you're writing the solo, or when he's playing it off the top of his head, he's not worried about jumping from this pattern to that pattern to this pattern. He's not thinking about it. He's only thinking about the notes and creating the melody that he wants. And it just happens to be that that all that stuff does fall into patterns. So from an educational point of view, it's a good idea to look at patterns, but from a musical point of view, it's really not. Anyway, I'll sort of take this apart for you. The first thing he's playing is just the first 3 notes of a major scale. He's in B flat major here. That's just Do, Re, and Mi. And he's taking the second note in the scale and bending it up to the third. And back down to the second. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1. And with bending, it's an important thing to remember when you're bending that to bend and make the bend sound real in tune and real consonant or sort of in tune with the chord, you should bend from a note in the scale to another note in the scale, not halfway in between, because it'll sound ugly and sour. And that's what he's doing. So there's a line right out of a major scale, and he's using one that's sort of just written on one string like a linear scale. And he slides up and plays. Which is, you can fit that into that form 3 major scale pattern. If these patterns look foreign to you, send me an envelope with your name and address and a stamp on it to the address at the end of the show, and I'll mail these lessons out to you so you can see them on paper. That form 3 scale, he's just picking notes out of it. And he's bending from the second note, there's the root, from the second note up to the third note, just like you did here, only an octave higher. And that's a quick little bend from the third note to the fourth note. Then he's moving up, and this is where he goes into the relative minor pattern. And he's playing that B flat, which is the root of the key, but he's put his fingers on those consecutive frets. And he's playing that blues scale, basically. And he's sliding out of it. And now he's using the form 1 major scale pattern. So he's gone from a scale, sort of a linear scale on one string, into the form 3 scale, into a relative minor or relative blues pattern, back into the form 1 scale again. One thing to notice about a solo like this is that it starts out low and it works its way slowly up higher as he's coming to the close of it. And everything up to that point is played fairly slow at a slower tempo. And then to add some excitement to it, he's going to play this quicker. And he plays that ugly looking chord there to kind of just add some edge to those quick notes, and he's going into that major scale again. And building a solo like that, where you're starting out low and you're kind of gradually working up higher, it keeps the listener real interested, and it always gives them something else, something to look forward to, because it keeps building and building and building. And he finally ends by playing that B flat, the root of the chord and the root of the key that the band's in, and the root of the chord that the band's playing, and which finally it finalizes the solo, and then they go back into the verse. So you can really tell when the solo's over because of the build, intention, and then the resolution, meaning playing the root. It makes the whole solo real easy to listen to and really easy to remember. So for this week, maybe what you could think about is look at the major scale, look at that relative minor scale, and see how the two relate to one another, and try to blur the point where the blues scale stops and the major scale starts. Just have a look at how they walk into one another and see both those scales as one big scale. And pretty soon that happens, and all the scales start just flowing into one another. And it gets easier and easier as you go along. So if you want copies of these lessons, send me out in a self-addressed stamped envelope, and I'll mail them out to you. And the address will come up real shortly here when the credits roll. So thanks a lot, and have a good week.